Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of the Minimalist Educator podcast. We are with Dr. Peter Turner today. How are you, Dr. Peter Turner?
Hello, I'm very well, thank you. Thank you for having me on the podcast.
Oh, you are very welcome. And Tammy is here as well. How are you today, Tammy?
I'm doing well. I'm excited for this conversation because it's one of our episodes where we're talking about um, something, like education adjacent, we'll call it, right?
Yeah,
So I'm super excited about this topic.
absolutely, for sure. So, we definitely want to talk to Peter about his new book, for sure, and the research that has gone into that and the findings that came out. But
Mhm.
I would like to start with telling Tammy a little bit of a story. So, Peter lived a couple of
Uh-oh.
streets up from me when we were kids. So, his
Uh-huh.
family lived in Australia for a while, which is how we knew each other. But
Hmm.
Pete was one of these kids that would run around the neighborhood with a handheld camera
Oh,
making
I love
amateur
it.
videos. And
Hmm.
so he has taken that interest, that passion, that curiosity into
Hmm.
the rest of his life. And now he is teaching about film, writing about film, researching about film. So I'd love, Pete, if you can tell us a little bit about that lifelong passion that you've had and where it's taken you to today.
Oh, well, yeah, that is funny. That's how you remember me. That's sweet. I still have video, like I have video of you on a New Year's Eve from when you're probably about 15. So yes, that it's nothing dodgy. Don't weird out. I'm not freaking out anyone. Yeah, no, gosh, I mean, it started before that. My mum got me into like stage school when I was really little, and I think I was on a film set when I was maybe about six or something like that, and I hadn't realised that there was a behind the scenes. So it blew my mind, and I was just absolutely in love with the idea that films got made from that point on. And then my dad got us a video camera when I was, I don't know, maybe about 13 or something. And I just commandeered that, and it was my video camera. And me and my friends spent a lot of time just making these silly movies where literally the first line of the movie was like, somebody picking up a phone and saying, "You've got 10 minutes to live," or something. And so we'd just go straight into an action scene, and that was that. And yeah, and then I studied film. When I came back from Australia, I studied film at A level, and I just fell in love with that. Went through uni, taught film and media, then decided I had to do a PhD on it, and then started writing books about it. And yeah, yeah, it's just I still absolutely love films.
I love this journey and the fact that something that you were doing in childhood had propelled you, that love for film, and you were one of those people who said, that's what I'm going to do, because that doesn't happen all the time, right? So, like, think about there's plenty of us who had dreams as little kids or had hobbies that we thought were fun and didn't really know that they would be something you could have as a career. And so I think that, like, your journey to me is inspiring because it shows that if you love something, you can make it what your career is and what you live for. So I'm glad that we're talking about this with you because I think this can be a great source of inspiration. And so I have a lot of questions actually, but I'm not sure where to start. Um, Maybe we'll talk a little bit about, since you kind of took us through your journey, if you can tell us, normally we would end a show with like maybe what's next or something, but I want to know more about what you're doing next. So you have written a book and you have a next step planned, which is super interesting and I think very relatable to what could be a piece that can be connected into education because I think there's like a gap there. So what you're doing, I think, is really interesting.
Yeah, so well, the next project is sort of it's in its very early stages. We're just trying to get ethical approval for it right now, so we're just writing ethical approvals and things. But I'm basically teaming up with a psychologist at Oxford Brookes, which is where I work, and we are going to hopefully test out some of the theories which I theorized in my previous book. My previous book was all about found footage horror films. If anyone doesn't know what a found footage horror film, it's a horror film where the characters in the film are holding the camera, so like the Blair Witch Project or Paranormal Activity, those sorts of things. And I basically came up with all these theories about what I think the viewer's mind is doing, or what the techniques in the film are trying to make the viewer's mind do, the cognitive processing. But I didn't test any of them. I didn't experiment with it. So now I'm teaming up with this psychologist, and we're actually going to test if any of my theories are right, which could end up being very embarrassing if none of them are. But hopefully, some of them might be. But we're really thinking about, what like how these films are supposed to be ultra realistic, and what those sort of realist techniques, yeah, what they do to our mind as we're watching, what processes are kind of elicited.
Oh, I'm looking forward to seeing some of that. That sounds really cool.
Should be fun,
Yeah,
I hope.
absolutely. So the most recent book in early 2026, Unsuitable Film and Video Audiences. So the premise of the research that you were doing, correct me if I'm wrong, is about kids who grew up in 80s and 90s but somehow managed to get their hands on films that were for 18 plus, for adult viewing audiences. And so it's really them looking back at those experiences as kids, but them now as adults, and that might be parents themselves. And so there's a lot of interesting findings coming out there. But one of the things that I found really interesting was what you were talking about as film as a social activity, and that there was a lot of bonding around who's seen what films and what happened in the film, and even playing out the film, and talking about building that social capital, gifting the storylines to other people. I really enjoyed hearing all about that, and you don't often think about that with film in childhood. So can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean it's interesting because like hearing it back from you is it shows. I think one of the I shouldn't go straight into the problems of my book, but this is the way my mind works, so I will. It's based on 300 questionnaires, and so yeah, 300 questionnaires, people that were sort of born between 1969 and 1980, so they would have been either young children or maybe early teens in the 80s. Um, and yes, it's really, I think most of the people that responded to this questionnaire um, really loved their experiences. They all had really positive experiences with watching films that they weren't allowed to watch, according to the British Board of Film Classification, who rated them 15 or 18 or whatever. Um, but so they had overwhelmingly positive experiences. So what you're talking about there, that social bonding, these people found that if you'd seen particular films, it kind of raised your social capital in the playground. Some people sort of talked about how it allowed them talking about the film, sort of allowed them to process it and allowed them to live with the film longer, because this was the days before the internet and you could get hold of any film you wanted at any time. So these people would maybe catch a film on late night television, or maybe that the video would have been in their house but only for a night or two, maybe it was being rented or whatever. And so they were so sort of overwhelmed and so drawn to these films that they were desperate to unpack them. They were desperate to talk about them. and that was a really big part of the research is that it's not just about the experience of watching the film, it's that post experience of discussing it, and sharing it with others, and even passing on details. And sometimes the details were wrong, and so sometimes people were lying about what they were seeing, or they were misremembering. There's all sorts of interesting stuff in there. Yeah, but basically, it was lovely to see how people bonded over this. What I don't think you're getting from the book is possibly the other side of that, where some children probably felt really left out, I would imagine. And if there was no way they could get hold of these films, they either had to sit there and lie and say they had seen them, which some people had sort of half admitted to doing, or they maybe just got left out. And people had a sort of there was an interesting thing in the responses where people almost had a hierarchy of the other kids in the school. So there was the kids that had watched loads of stuff, and then there was the kids that hadn't seen so many stuff. And if you happen to have like a pirate copy of a film, or if you managed to tape a film off TV, it automatically kind of raised your social capital. So there was this whole kind of like subculture of I call them in the book early engagers with restricted entertainment. But yeah, it's interesting. It gave you subcultural capital.
That's very relatable. I remember in when I was in grade six, I had my teacher was a first year teacher. And so, that's always rough. So
Mhm.
the kids can sometimes take advantage of that, as we did. One of the things that we would do if we had like an indoor recess because it was snowy or something, we would roll the TV cart into the room at lunch and put in Friday the 13th. And
So many stories like this.
yeah, yeah, it's such a core memory from that school year. And I mean we thought our teacher didn't know, but she had to have known that's what we were watching. And so it makes me think to now. Like I'll go into schools and I see little kids like kindergarten at Halloween this year or last year dressed as a Demogorgon from
Hmm.
Stranger Things. Or
Hmm.
like they're in second grade and they have a Stranger Things t-shirt. But I'm like, is it because it was set in the 80s and it just like I was so drawn to it because it's so nostalgic and it made me feel like I was going back to what films felt like then. And is that the draw? Like, what's the line too with parents on Stranger Things? Because, there's little ones watching it and some in fifth grade aren't allowed to watch it. So I'm interested to hear from a parental perspective too, like, how do you teach kids to watch this with a certain lens, maybe?
Yeah, there's so much to unpack there. So lots
Sorry.
of the lots of no, no, that's okay, that's good. There lots of the people who I lots of the participants, lots of the respondents in the study are now parents, and they often talked about their own concerns with things now. Squid Game came up a lot because Squid Game has been advertised in Roblox, or you can get a. I don't understand any of this stuff because my kids aren't there yet, but like you can get a Squid Game skin or something, like a character skin or something. So kids know about Squid Game, and some of the respondents were talking about how they were worried that some of the kids in their child's class had seen Squid Game, and so they all have these same kind of worries that their parents often did. And they'll often call that my response will often call themselves hypocrites because they're now thinking about how can I protect my child, but also they're far more worried, and it's because video was new in the 80s, so it was the new technology. It meant that films were suddenly in the home, which they hadn't really been before. They might have been on late night television, but now videos was sort of particularly in the UK, because in the UK video was taken up like nobody's business. I think we were second only to Japan in the uptake of video. So yeah, so there's always these new worries around new technologies, and parents back then were worried about video. Now the respondents that are parents, they're all worried about social media and the internet for obvious, reasons. Um, and but they don't seem to be so concerned, apart from some people talking about Squid Game and Stranger Things. Although I don't actually think there was any mention of Stranger Things, weirdly, but there was lots of mention of Squid Game. People are essentially more worried that now their children are watching, porn or beheading videos or real life stuff on the internet. So it's interesting how the fears sort of move with new technologies as they always do. Um, but yeah, I don't know. I mean, what really I think comes out of the book, and it comes from people speaking about their relationship with their own children, and it also comes out of them talking about their own relationship with their parents back then, is that essentially nothing can be that damaging if people are talking about it. Children will self-censor and they will find coping mechanisms to deal with what they see. And we don't give children enough credit for their kind of their agency. There are lots of examples of people of kids sort of being made to watch things by older cousins or older friends and things like that. But again, they found coping mechanisms. They found ways to deal with it, and I think that the best examples, the most I think interesting examples, are people that watch things with their parents, and it feels like is nothing is too much if you're watching it with a parent and you're talking about it and you're talking about how it's constructed and you're questioning and critiquing it. And these are things that children can do. I don't know at what age that starts, and I'm not certainly not going to show my 5-year-old Squid Game yet, as much as I'd like to. But yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, absolutely. I was shown Cujo as a small child by my cousins, and my coping mechanism was hiding under the sofa. That was how I dealt with it. Yeah.
But so then did that work? Because there's a lot of stories of people who said they didn't watch things and they just heard it. And they heard the alien popping out of someone's chest, and it was their imagination was way worse than what the film could actually be. So
Yeah, possibly. I mean, the fact that I still remember it now is probably a
yeah.
bad sign for
Right.
sure.
But you're laughing about it, so you're
Yeah.
okay.
So just kind of on that line of thinking, so you know how sometimes on in people's reels, they'll have a scene from a movie or something and they'll change the music so it changes how you view something.
Mm.
So if you let a child or someone who's afraid of some like scary movies or shows, just the video and took away the audio, would it be as scary? Because like to me, the audio I think is something like I probably would plug my ears versus close my eyes. I don't know.
That's really interesting. There's a whole section in one of the chapters about experiencing films as a multi-sensory thing, and
Mhm.
audio does come up as a really big part of that. People remember specific noises. There's one specific scene in James Cameron's film Aliens where the Marines are sort of they're all there with their guns up and ready, and they're waiting to see what's going to be coming at them, and they have these sensors that are sort of making this pulsing boom 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 noise, and they're just waiting for the aliens to get closer to them, and so many people talked about that sound just putting them sort of over the edge with anticipation. So yeah, it's definitely a multi-sensory thing. But again, I think this is something you talk to your children about. If they, I really am a firm believer in sort of obviously I don't think you should force children to watch anything they don't want to watch. But the best way to sort of, I don't want to say desensitize them, but it sort of is desensitize them, is just to break it down, to show them how it's constructed and to show them how they are being manipulated. So, yeah. And parents did that with their children. A lot of parents would sit with their children and watch these films. So a surprising amount of mums that loved horror would just they would want to watch horror, so they'd get their kids and they'd sit and watch horror with them.
That was quite an interesting part of your research as well, is the different gender roles that came out with the mums and the dads, and when it's a bonding experience and when it's not, and what they
Yeah.
wanted to censor and what they were quite happy to join their kids in. I thought that was a really interesting part too.
Yeah, I mean, I suspect it's not that surprising to many people, but it's crazy how much sex is the bigger problem compared to violence. Like it's crazy. I'm reading all these stories, and parents were so freaked out about watching anything sexual in front of their kids. I get, yeah. But so I don't know. I guess everyone relates to that. It's a weird thing, but it's shocking to me that the respondents would literally say things like, "It was absolutely fine to watch heads getting decapitated, but I couldn't see a single boob or something." And you're just like, "What? That's mad. That is insane. What are we like?" But it is what it is.
It is so funny. Like it's so backwards
Yeah,
because because we can use film or, viewing something as a teaching tool. We do it in classrooms all the time, right? And so I guess it's just that discomfort with the content, right? So like it's
yeah.
easier for someone to say, that's not real. They made that up
Yes.
versus what's real.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. I think that's it. And yeah, and it all, so much of it comes down to the worry of children imitating. So I think I guess you are less likely to think that your children are going to imitate some of the terrifying things you see in a horror film, but the swearing and sex, anything sexual, you might have genuine worries about. Like it's funny because my oldest sister is actually in the study. I made her do it 'cause she's the right age, and she didn't want to take part. But I was like, I really want to get someone in who isn't in love with films, and so I made my sister do it, and she mentioned about our dad finding out that she was upstairs watching Risky Business, and there's a quite an interesting sex scene with Tom Cruise on a train, and as soon as that came on, he was watching it downstairs, and he came straight upstairs and switched off her TV, and there's so many examples like this, but yeah, and it seems like mums are remembered more for being, kind of generally speaking, they're remembered more for being kind of censors, and turning things off. But I wonder if that's a function of them being around the house more in the 80s. Like I asked people about what their mums and dads did, and more mums were sort of either part-time work or stay-at-home mums. Um, so yeah, they're generally remembered for being a bit more sensorial, if that's a word, and the dads are more sort of a bit more permissive. And there's all these sort of stories of dad's friend bringing a video round and all those sorts of things, or thinking someone's dad was very cool because they let them watch films and things. But it's a generalization, and yeah, it's also tainted by the fact that 70% of my respondents are men, and only 30% are women. So, yeah.
Interesting. Interesting. So if I'm going to shift gears a little bit, going back to how you kind of landed in this place, making your videos as a kid, if there was like if you were sharing some kind of life advice with young kids who had dreams to go into, like, whether it's writing or filming or really anything that they're just passionate about, what would you say to them to kind of inspire them to keep on the path? like follow what your passion is.
That's what I'd say to them. Follow what your passion. No, gosh, what would I say to them? It's funny because I always thought I was going to be a filmmaker. And then as soon as I got a taste of professional productions, um, I I went very much off it. I I don't like how long it takes, which is I think why I'm a little bit drawn to found footage horror films because they seem so cheap and quick and sort of easy to make. And horror films generally, they don't have to be as perfect. It doesn't feel like everything has to be as perfect sometimes. Um, so yeah, I guess that means my advice would be it your dream can sort of change. I thought I was going to be a filmmaker, but then I realized that actually I love talking, thinking, and writing about films, and so that's what I went into, and I've basically dabbled in all of that. And yeah, so I teach about films so I can talk about them and share my passion and enthusiasm every day. And I write about films. I became a film journalist, which sort of helped me to get on red carpets and do meet all sorts of cool people and stuff and get to watch films. So yeah, maybe don't you don't have to yeah, I think you have to remember that there are often many jobs that are associated with the one thing that you might be thinking that you're going towards as a kid.
Yeah, it
Don't
doesn't
know if
have
that
to be
makes sense.
too doesn't have to be too specific what the end goal
Yeah.
is, but just keep an open mind in what you're curious in.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's very cool.
I
I
hope so.
think, unfortunately, it is almost time for us to wrap up. Can't believe it. But what we like to do at the end of our episodes is to ask for a pair down pointer. So, something, a little tip or a tool that helps people, you know, become a little bit more minimalist.
Hmm. Yeah, I should have thought about this a bit more. That my I sort of I think my tip would be sort of going back to what I just said, like think like the best horror films. If you accept that the Blair Witch Project is one of the best horror films ever made, that is a film that didn't have a completed script. Its actors didn't weren't professional actors. Its directors had never done it before. It was all largely kind of improvised. So I guess what I'm saying is trust yourself and maybe tying in with you guys' next project, like things don't have to be perfect. Things don't have to be perfect straight away, especially if it's stopping you from moving forward. I know too many people who procrastinate because they're trying to get things perfect first go. Don't do that. Just try and get your thoughts out of you.
That is a really great way to end the show and
Oh,
just
good.
wrap up. Yeah, no, it's true. Like, just trust yourself, right?
Yeah.
Like, go with, just start, do something. Don't sit on it.
Yes. Yes.
Relatable right there.
Good. I hope so.
Yeah,
And you've given us a nice quote for our book, so thank you. Appreciate
yeah.
that.
There we go. Good. Excellent. Good luck with it.
Thank you. Thanks so much for being with us today, Pete.
That's a pleasure. Cheers. Bye.